For the drawing file for exercise P4-21, I'm not going to go through the entire drawing file, but I do want to give you some of the hints as to some of the commands that you may not have seen previously. So what I'm going to do, I've got my 3D model complete. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to New, and when the new screen comes up, I'm going to select Metric, and then I'm going to come down here to my drawing files, and I'm going to pick an ANSI millimeter IDW file and click Create. Now for this particular object, since it's sort of large, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and use the default C-size sheet that it comes with. That way I don't have to worry about going with, smaller views or anything. I can just go ahead and place my views. So for my base view, I can see right now that my base view is looking like my top view. What that means is that I drew this thing in the wrong orientation, but in the case of this particular example, I think I do want my top view to be my base view, so I'm going to go ahead and go with this. And I'm just going to left click to place my view right here. And then that's the only view that I'm going to place for right now, because I know that the right side view of this is pretty much going to be useless. A front view of this is pretty much going to be useless. So what I want to do is I first want to clean this view up, and then I'm going to do a section view and an auxiliary view. So I'm actually going to move this over here a little bit further, but to clean this view up, I'm going to double click on this view, and under display options I want to, tangent edges are currently not being displayed, so that's good. I don't want to see any tangent edges because they just get in the way. If I turn these on and say OK, what you can see is it dims out some of those tangent edges. The tangent edges are going to apply any place where there happens to be a fillet. So I'm just going to say OK so that I don't have any tangent edges, so we don't see any of the fillets really in this particular view. Now I am going to do another base view, which in this case I'm going to hit the little change view orientation button, and I'm going to go to the exact isometric view that I want to be visible, and that's what this is here. So I'm going to say finish custom view, and I'm going to place that right there. We'll say OK. I'm going to double click that and turn it into shaded. Now in this view we can see where all the fillets go, we can see all that information, so we now have that. Next I want to do a section view of this view, and I want it to cut right through the center of the piece. So I'm going to left click and draw a line. So I left click here, I left click here, then I right click and say continue. Now I'm going to place that right down here. And what this is going to do is this is going to give me a decent section view where I can see a lot of the information that I need. I don't, however, like to see this entire line, so I'm just going to right click and uncheck show entire line. Now here's why I place the views with room to the left, because I want to do an auxiliary view from this view over here. So I'm going to click on auxiliary, select the view, and then the angled line that I want the auxiliary view to be based off of. Now I can only move this perpendicular to that face, so I'm going to put it over there, and then I'm going to right click on it and go to alignment break. What that does is that allows me to move this view anywhere that I want to move the view, and it's a little bit easier to see on the screen exactly what's going on. So now I'm just going to move a couple of things around just so that I don't have any lines that are actually cutting through my part. Here I've got my section view of the front. This is actually the line, and it's on a layer that's turned off that shows where the auxiliary view is. These are kind of bad, but if you want to have those on, it does work well at showing where the view is actually coming from. Just make sure that you don't accidentally drag in too far, that it's actually out wide enough that you can see everything, and again, I don't want to see the entire line. So here I've got my section A and my auxiliary view B. So here I have everything that I need. This auxiliary view looks kind of bad, so I'm going to double left click on it, and instead of having the display options set up to be from the parent view, I'm going to uncheck that and turn off the hidden lines. So that gives me a pretty good pretty clear view of everything that's going on there. Now the only thing that I can't really see from any of the views that I have represented, let me go ahead and move that over there, is the details for where this hole is actually lined up. If I place a center line through here, then I can get an accurate dimension, so that's what I'm going to do. But at this point, I can go ahead and start dimensioning all of the objects that I have on here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the Annotate tab, and I'm going to come over here to my center marks first. Because center marks are going to be pretty important as far as these views are concerned. So I'm going to left click here, and I'm going to put a center mark on this hole, center mark on this hole, center mark on this one, and I'm not going to place it on any of the other holes because we're not looking at the front view of them. So next I'm going to go ahead and use a centerline bisector. When I click on this, all I need to do is select the two lines, and it will automatically place the center line in between. So now I can get a good distance on this particular hole. So at this point I'm going to start my dimensioning process. So first things first, I want to go from the center line to this point. That's going to be 21. The way it is in the book is 13 up from the top of the base, which is 8 thick. That's a really nasty way to dimension this thing. This 21 is going to be a lot easier to lay out when somebody actually has to go to cut that hole. My next dimension that I'm going to place is going to be the 35. Now that I have that in there, I'm going to go ahead and dimension this, and I'm going to move this dimension right here. Just so it's a little bit easier to see, we're going to put it right there. I'm going to move my section information out of the way. Go right back to dimension. I want to dimension from this point to this point. That's going to be 20. And realistically, that's pretty much the majority of the dimensions that I actually want to place in this part, or in this particular view. I'm going to do all of the hole dimensioning in this view. I can dimension the fillet in this view. I can dimension a lot in this view here. So now coming up to this view, I want to go from that end point to this end point, and I want to get my 80 degrees. I want to dimension from here to here, bring that out at 60 degrees. We've got our dimension from here to here, which is going to be 40 degrees, and you can either bring that down to here or you can place it up here, but make sure it's somewhere that's clear enough to read and that you're not crossing any of your extension lines or dimension lines. So I want to move that one down here because it's just going to be easier for me to see. Next I'm going to go ahead and dimension the center point of this, which is going to be 20. I can dimension the distance across here, which is 15. I can dimension the distance across the back piece of this, which is here to here, which is going to be 35. And I can also dimension this actual thickness right here, which is also 15. So here you can see I'm starting to lay this out. Now if I take a look, I can get all the information I need to draw this line. I can draw this across, I can draw this line, I can get my offsets in, I can get my corner points. I can now draw the entire top view. One other thing I'm going to do just to make things a little bit clearer is I'm going to drag this out a little bit, and then I'm going to drag this center line out like this. What that does is that lets me know that this is centered vertically in this view. That way I don't have to try to put in some arbitrary dimension based off of some filleted edges. Now I also want to come down here and put in here that this is also 15, or I can extend this out a little bit and then just put a note over here using text. We'll locate the text right here and just say object is symmetrical about centerline. Say OK, and there we've got our note. So I know that any dimensions that I place over here are going to apply to the other side and vice versa. So now I've taken away the need to dimension about half of the objects in here. When I dimension these holes, I only have to dimension them over here. I don't have to dimension them anywhere else. So that's something that is definitely going to save me a little bit of time. I can come back into this note and I'm just going to skip 2 lines down, and I'm going to put in here all fillets and rounds equal R3 unless otherwise stated. So now I've got a note that covers all of the fillets and rounds minus that one that I have a need for. Now this is a hole, so I can use the hole note for that, and realistically with the views that I have, the best place to do that is probably going to be over here. I don't want to do it over here. This view here, I can see it, but it's not necessarily the clearest thing in the world. But if I come over here to hole and thread notes and I grab this, it's just going to tell me that it is a diameter 12 through hole. And for the purposes of this exercise, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to grab this hole right here. That's a diameter 22 through. It'd probably look a little bit better if I placed it up here. So there I've got diameter 22 through hole, and I want to just stretch this out because I don't like seeing dimension lines being cut. So now the only thing I would need to do is come over here to this view and begin to dimension where these holes actually are placed. So we'll go from center line to here. That's at 10. We'll go from center line to here. That's at 14, and that does apply to both of those holes. Now we have from here to here, which is going to be 12. And again, the way they're laid out in the book is it's called out the distance between the holes. Rather than doing it that way, I'm going to give the distance from the edge to each of the holes. This is going to make it a little bit clearer for the person that actually has to locate these. I can dimension from here all 3 of those holes with no problem. Next thing I want to do is I want to come in here and label this fillet. So I'm just going to go back to my dimension command, and I'm going to put in a radius of 10 for that particular fillet. Now if I really look in here, I see what I have. I have my 10, I have my 14. I need to drag that out a little bit so that it's visible. We can put it right like that. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch out these center lines just a hair so that they line up with that dimension line. That way there's no doubt as to whether or not both of those holes are at the same height. So I've got my height of 14, I've got my height of 10, I have my 25, my 28, and my 12. I've got my note for all my fillets and rounds. I've got this back hole dimensioned exactly where it is. All I need is the height. Because I have this center line in here now, I don't need to put in that it's 17.5 inches from the, or 17.5 millimeters from the edge. I have that information for me. So the last thing that you want to do is you just want to go through, verify that you have all the dimensions that you need, and then once you do, the last step is just to come up here to print, and we are going to print this to a PDF. If you don't have a PDF printer installed, just go to export PDF and it will export it into the PDF file format, and that PDF file is what you're actually going to be turning in this week.